Welcome back to Black Girl Meets Pop Culture. I'm your host Zoe, and today we'll be discussing Loki Season 2, Episode 1, titled Ouroboros. But before we get into the episode, as per usual, I'd like to remind you to follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and or YouTube. And when you do so, don't forget to hit the follow button, or on YouTube's case, the subscribe button, so you get notifications every time I post. Secondly, you can follow me on Instagram at blackgirl_meets_popculture for further information about this podcast. And finally, you can financially support this podcast starting just 99 cents. The link will be in the description down below. Now, let's start off with the synopsis. Loki finds himself lost to time and torn, quite literally, between past, present, and future. So, to preface this episode, I didn't take a lot of notes. I feel like my review of Loki is going to be very different compared to my review of Superman and Lois and of Avatar. Avatar, I've already seen it. And Superman and Lois, I have a lot more intimate knowledge about Superman. But in the case of Loki, I have not watched season 1 since it came out. And so I feel like that's going to be a reflection of my review in this episode. Because I thought this episode was really good. I was just confused half of the time because I haven't seen the first season in a long time. And so my objective before I talk about the next episode is to rewatch season 1 and then questionably rewatch this episode, because I feel like my opinion will change of this episode and I would probably rate it a lot higher than it currently is on my on how I rated it so far. So that's a preference. Or to preference. You know what I mean, to put it in to context, to contextualize all of this. It's late right now when I'm recording this, so to contextualize all of this going forward. Furthermore, I want to kind of contextualize like my opinion on Loki as a character before going any further into this. And I feel like I didn't necessarily like season 1 as much as other people, and I'm definitely going to give it a second chance, especially after watching this episode. But I feel as though I didn't necessarily like season 1 of Loki as much as other people did, because I'm so sick and tired of Loki as a character. I know that seems like kind of shocking and that's kind of controversial. I guess that's the idea for Hot Takes with Zoe on my Instagram. Follow it at blackgirl_meets_popculture. But I just feel like Loki is the most overused not even Marvel character, MCU character, because Loki in the comic books and Loki in the MCU are two separate, entirely different characters. And I'm fine with that. Don't get me wrong. I think the MCU's Loki is much more compelling, and I got that through this episode because you can see how in the beginning of season 1 to even now, how empathetic Loki is. Loki shows a lot of emotion. Of course, he showed a lot of emotion last season, but this season in particular, it's because I haven't seen the last season in so long that I kind of forgot that Loki has so much emotion, and that he actually really cares. Like, he sees Casey and he's like, "Do you remember me? Do you remember me?" And I forgot about Casey. But he's like, "Do you remember me?" And he's like torn when like Mobius and all these other people don't remember him. He's like, my goodness. He feels alone, and you understand why, because there's honestly there's nothing left for him. If he were to follow, the path of his timeline, of the path of his life, he's dead. He's dead. And I guess that ties back into my problem with Loki, is the so many countless bait and switches of his death. And I understand he's the god of mischief, but my goodness, they do it in the first Thor movie. They do it in the second Thor movie. I mean, my goodness, it's so annoying. Did they do it in Avengers? No, because they get him in Avengers. So yeah, they do it in Thor, they do it in Ragnar. Excuse me. They do it in Thor and they do it in the Dark World, and it's just so annoying. And I think Loki is such a impactful character to the MCU. Because he was like the only villain to survive. But I think it's also down to Tom Hiddleston's acting. Not even just the writing. I just think it's his acting. You know, one of my and I was on a group chat some time ago. We made fun about this scene, but one of my favorite scenes from Thor is when Loki starts to figure out that he's a frost giant. And he's telling his father, or he believes to be his father, Odin, he's like, tell me the truth. And he yells at him, tell me! Of course, I'm not gonna yell it right now like how he does it. He's like, tell me! But, that scene, you feel the conflict within him, but I don't think that comes across without Tom Hiddleston. At least the way that Tom Hiddleston portrays it. Loki is broken, yet sympathetic and correct in some ways. I mean, his family lied to him for millennia, and he had a right to know. And maybe if he knew, things would have turned out differently for him. But I know I'm going on a bit of a ramble, but I feel like, contextualizing everything is important to note these minor details about Loki, because I feel like they culminate into something very bigger, especially when you think of this television show. How he's concerned for these people, and in the sense of, he's like, you think you're better than me, but we're all on the same playing field. You are a variant as well. You could have been erased. You had lives just like how I did, and they were ripped from you. It shows how he's empathetic. Even though he is this villain / anti-hero, you feel me? We still see some form of he's kind of like Magneto, in the sense of Magneto is very charming and charismatic. He has a lot of charisma, and that goes with Loki as well. He's very charming and charismatic. I mean, he's, once again, god of mischief. But his fear of, what is it, He Who Remains? Yeah, I always forget how you say Kang, this version of Kang, the clearly immortus version of Kang. But he fears what is to come. And he doesn't just fear it for himself, he fears it for everybody else. Because he knows it's not just about him now. And now this is kind of going into my review of the episode. First of all, I like how this episode starts immediately after the ending of season 1, and we get our question is immediately, at least I say immediately answered, because some shows drag it out. If it's an anime, they'll drag it out forever. But the question that it gets answered is, why did they not remember him? Why did Mobius and the others not remember him at the end of season 1? And it's because Loki is practically glitching, into the Spider-Verse. Loki is glitching. He's not necessarily present. He's going throughout the past. He's going through the past, present, and future. And we see in the end where he goes into the future, and I love how they portrayed that with Mobius writing skin with the dust, and Loki goes to exact same place, but in the future, and it's in the future because it says skin on it, because Mobius wrote it down. I forgot what I was trying to say. I got sidetracked. Oh, how I liked how it started immediately after. Yeah. That's why we have notes, y'all. But I like how it started immediately after season 1, and yes, how our questions immediately get answered, that Loki is not in the present, he's in the past when all this is happening, with them not remembering him. And then as time goes on, we see more and more, like with the revealing of Kang. By the way, let me make this clear. Let me make this very clear. Going forward, I understand the news and everything going on with Jonathan Majors right now, that he was fired very recently by Disney. But going forward, when I talk about Jonathan Majors, I'm just going to be talking about him as an actor, not him as a person, as an individual. Okay? Yeah, just want to make that clear. We're going to talk about him as an actor, separate the actor from the person, which obviously it can be very difficult to do. But for this situation, I just want to make it very clear. I'm separating the actor from the person. Yeah. Even though, the court has deemed that he is guilty for certain things, and we do not agree with or I do not agree with violence and stuff like that. I think it's only fair to separate and be able to say, hey, he may not be a good person. I don't know the guy. Let me just say that. He may not be a good person, at least legally. He may not be a good person, but as an actor, he's a brilliant actor. I cannot deny that. So I just want to preface that going forward. But because people are like, you had to, all you had to do was play a villain. You didn't have to be a villain in real life. And I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna make any of those comments. We're just gonna be talking about him as an actor. And he shows up like once in this episode, but his face is like everywhere. So I just want to preference that. But yes, the fear that Loki has of Kang, because Kang really seems, and it's just like, it just sucks with what happened with Ant-Man Quantumanium and how Kang is like done away with by Ant-Man and his stupid ants. Like, really, Ant-Man, you beat Kang? Anyway, but you get that menacing presence of Kang, even though he is not necessarily present throughout the episode. When I talked about Superman Lois, I had theories. I don't know if I'm gonna do like a theory part of this, because I know something. Honestly, I only know one thing that happens in this show, so I don't know if I'm gonna do theories. But I think I love how I say I don't know how to do theories, but I'm about to go into a theory. But I mean, like a whole section just dedicated to theories. But I feel like Loki being pulled apart, because it only happens to him, and apparently it doesn't happen to Sylvie. So I'm thinking maybe it happens to him because Sylvie's the one that killed He Who Remains. Like, she's his variant. So maybe through that connection, I don't know how, I don't know why, but maybe through that connection he's affected by the removal of He Who Remains. And speaking of, like, the more I watched this episode, the more I understood why He Who Remains set up the TVA, because like without some form of order, whether it's bastardized or not, the timeline could just go crazy. So you could understand why he's like, no, you don't want to kill me, because you think I'm bad, there are other me's that are worse. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes. Yeah, other things I liked about this episode. Oh, the time slipping. The time slipping reminded me very much of Watchmen. 2019? Yeah, 2019's HBO's Watchmen. And for those of you who don't know, I'll try to make it as easy to understand. Dr. Manhattan has the ability to experience his past, his present, and his future all at once, so simultaneously. But only his past. So let's say, like, he can't experience other people's childhood. He has to experience it firsthand as a first person. So there is a scene in Watchmen where he's talking to, oh gosh, I forgot her name, but the actress is Regina King. He's talking, my goodness, is her name Angela? I don't even remember. Anyway, he's talking to Regina King, and he's like, oh yeah, I had that conversation with your grandfather. And basically, through them having a conversation, through Regina King and Dr. Manhattan having a conversation, Dr. Manhattan and Regina King's grandfather are having a conversation at the same time, because he experiences time all at once. So she's asking Dr. Manhattan, like, ask my grandfather about this individual. And so Dr. Manhattan, in the past, with him being able to experience time all at once, asked Regina King's grandfather that question about this individual. And he said, who is that? And so when she asked that question, she kind of starts the chicken before the egg, because she plants the idea in his head, and yet she can't, it's weird because that happened in the future. So a future event affects a past event. So that's what it kind of reminded me with Obi. I don't remember how to say his real name, but with Obi and how Obi is talking to Loki in the past and in the present, all this new, like, he's like, I don't know. And then slowly he's like, wait, I do know. Because he's had this conversation in the past, but now, like, the past is rewriting it. It's complicated to explain. The past is rewriting itself. Like, you would have to honestly watch it and experience it. And that's a positive to the show that, that the show discusses very deep topics. And by deep, I mean, like, not like, I don't know, like racial, but I mean, like, physics wise, or just having to think of certain things in certain contexts, and in, like, in science, if you will. It deals with it with tough things to wrap your head around, and yet it does so, I would argue, brilliantly. Even though it's kind of confusing, I wasn't confused, of everything else in the show. This is the one scene I wasn't confused on, so I enjoyed that. I guess the last thing I want to talk about is the cinematography, and I'm not going into explicit detail about a lot of things because I really want to just go back and watch the first season so I can do a better job of reviewing it. I'm just getting my feet wet. Once again, it's been a while since we've done these types of reviews, so please go easy on me. And honestly, I think I'm still recovering from my car accident. So please take it easy on me. In the words of Adele, go easy on me. But the cinematography and the special effects were just, I was so surprised, especially with the scene towards the end with Mobius, like, trying to get Loki to stop glitching. Here's why I was surprised, because the MCU has just been on the decline in special effects, and even in their cinematography. Like, shout out to Disney, because shout out to my friend King Beam, go follow him on YouTube. He talked about this with Obi-Wan Kenobi, the show, and how, like, the cinematography is, like, god awful, and he's absolutely right. The scene between Reva and I know I'm going a bit off topic, but the scene between Reva and Vader, when Vader fights Reva, the cinematography and the lighting and all of that just suck. And the lighting sucks. You know why the lighting sucks? Or why the lighting is so key to that scene? I mean, lighting is key to any scene, but to that scene directly is because Reva is a dark-skinned woman wearing dark clothes, and so is Vader wearing dark clothes, and the ground they're fighting on is a dark color. It's red. So you need enough color saturation and brightness and good lighting to really display that fight. And the cinematography, along with the crappy lighting, did not help it. So I am surprised that the cinematography in this show is on point. I really enjoyed, especially with the scene between, I mentioned before, Obi and Loki. That rhymes. Obi and Loki, and Obi and Mobius, and how they're how they were communicating between each other, and how, like, the camera was just focused on them. Like, it was such a simple shot, but it looks so beautiful. Like, I don't even know how to I even know how to describe it, but it was just, I don't know, it was so simple and it was so plain, but it portrayed everything. It captured everything that needed to be captured in that scene. I don't know why that struck a nerve with me. And then towards the end, with Mobius trying to save Loki, the cinematography, and of course the visual, the special effects, oh my goodness, it's just sad. Like, I'm complimenting it, but at the same time it's sad because the MCU is on such a decline with this stuff, and I'm just like, look at this. If you just take your time and stop trying to pump out content after content after content, and just focus and just breathe for a second, you can have amazing episodes amazing visual episodes, amazing writing, amazing episodes based on their writing, the acting, the directing. Man, this episode really is flawless. I would rate it now. I would probably rate it higher if once I see season 1 of Loki in context. I would rate this like a 4 out of 5. A 4 out of 5 because it's just something, and this like feels so like out of the realm of the MCU yet still in the MCU. Man, it's absolutely beautiful. Now, I feel like once again, if I enjoyed, because I remember when I watched season 1 of Loki, I wasn't like a super fan of it as other people were. So I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to watch season 1, come back to you talking about episode 2, and maybe dibble and dabble with talking about this episode again, just to give justice where justice is due. But yeah, I will rate this episode a 4 out of 5. But with that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this episode, which I'm sure you did, share with someone you think will like it, even someone you think won't like it. And I'll be back Wednesday with a new episode. But until then, peace.